Let's bring in ABC News senior investigative reporter Aaron Katersky and ABC News contributor and former FBI agent Brad Garrett for more on this. Aaron, we've learned that Frank James called police himself to say he was at this McDonald's, but that's not where he was arrested. So what happened there?
Really stunning. It's almost as if Frank James wanted to be caught. He, at some point, left Brooklyn and made it into Manhattan, and police are still trying to figure out how he did it and when. And during the middle of the day on Wednesday, he called police to say, "I think you're looking for me." He said he saw himself all over social media and on television. His phone was dying, and so he called police to give him a location of this McDonald's. But when officers showed up, he wasn't there. That's when, and you heard some of this, that's when those heads-up bystanders who recognized him since his picture had been all over the city said, "Hey, this is him, this is where he is," and they led officers over to him. Diane, he was sitting by a kiosk charging his cell phone.
Amazing. Now, Brad, the NYPD, the FBI, the U.S. Marshal's Office, they were all working tirelessly to try to find this guy. And in the end, it came down to him sort of turning himself in and these Good Samaritans spotting him. What do you make of that?
Well, I make of it that when mass shooters have completed their shooting and they survive, that unless they're suicidal, they just go about life. They don't think about hiding. I mean, in his case, my guess is for those 29 hours, he was someplace in Brooklyn or Manhattan just walking around and probably not worried about what he had done. He's probably proud as to what he had done. And so to call the police, in his reality, Diane, it kind of makes sense to me because he knew it was kind of over. So, okay, I'll go into custody now. But I did what I wanted to do for a brief period of time, maybe the first time in his adult life, he felt empowered.
And Aaron, what do we know about these bystanders who spotted him and then called police and reported it?
They had seen his picture, which had been blasted out all over the city in the hours leading up to the arrest, and they took pictures, they posted them to social media, police saw them, other people had been calling police. This is why you always hear the adage, if you see something, say something. New Yorkers are heads-up people, and as this Frank James was wandering around the East Village inexplicably, he was hiding in plain sight, and that's when people decided that, hey, I think this is him, and it turned out they were right. This doesn't mean the investigation is over, of course, because police are still trying to track all of his movements. They have a pretty good idea of when he entered New York. He was seen driving his rented U-Haul van, according to the criminal complaint, crossing the Verrazano Bridge into Brooklyn at about 4 o'clock in the morning Tuesday, so about 4.5 hours before the attack. But where did he go from there? The NYPD is checking out a number of reported spottings of that U-Haul van, including one at Floyd Bennett Field, the old airport out in Brooklyn, where an eyewitness said somebody may have been setting off a smoke canister. Was that a rehearsal? Police will try to figure that out.
Interesting. So many pieces still left to put together here. Brad, the NYPD originally said that they did not suspect this was terrorism. So what made this case go from a local crime to a federal terrorism case?
So I think what happened is that, but let's clarify a point first. When you're talking about terrorism, you're not really talking about Islamic international terrorism. There are clearly charges that are on the books that you can charge people with, 9/11, etc. But when you use the word terrorism when it relates to some sort of domestic event, think how they've charged him. I mean, it's against federal law to inflict violence on public transportation. And obviously that's why the law is written, because of the vulnerability of those locations. So that's what he's really been charged with. It's really more, I guess, a terrorist act. Obviously, you terrorize people, you go in a train car and you shoot them. But so I think what police saw was the following, that no, he's probably not some Islamic type extremist that's driven by an ideology. He's a guy that's just big time troubled, angry, and has ventilated his anger obviously in a very violent way. But you know, the avenue maybe in federal court may or may not be easier. He could well be charged at some point, Diane, in both federal and state court.
And so the terror charges in this case is because of where this happened and saying that he carried out a terrorizing act, but not necessarily that he was supported by a larger terrorist organization. Brad, I also know
Correct.
that there's been a lot of focus on the suspect's social media accounts. Is that shedding light on a possible motive?
Well, they're looking for a motive. And my guess is it may not be totally clear, but sort of break it down this way, that people who commit mass shootings basically interpret things a certain way. And if Mr. James was feeling more and more isolated, more and more powerless, and more angry, I mean, some of those vents in social media toward the mayor, Eric Adams, about homeless folks in the subway, and that crime, is rampant in the subway, according to him, and that somebody could go in and potentially commit a shooting. Now, obviously, that's what he did. But these are a buildup, Diane. They build up over weeks, months, sometimes years, and people just reach a point where I'm going to take charge, as illogical, obviously, as that sounds, and I'm going to commit this act. That was the high in his life, as I mentioned earlier, to commit this act, sadly, that occurred on Wednesday.
And Aaron, the MTA said that surveillance cameras at those Brooklyn stations, that they weren't working. Now the mayor is promising changes on the subway. Any sense of what those changes might be?
Well, the MTA was aware on Sunday that the cameras at 36th Street Station were not operable. So a couple of days before the actual event, there was some kind of a computer glitch. They weren't transmitting in real time as they were meant to do. So the authorities are going to try and look at that. It's a 472 station-wide system. So, of course, the camera you need is not going to be the camera you have. But the mayor is now looking to see whether there's something can be done to maybe screen passengers who enter the subway. Really, people are free to go about the subway as they like. They just have to go through the turnstile, and mainly the cameras are there to catch fare evaders as they're pointed to the turnstile, not even the platform. So they may try to change some of that. If there's a technology that can screen people without slowing them down and without bogging down the system, the mayor and the state say they're going to try and take a look at that. Something maybe like what Disney World has that's very expensive, and we don't know if it can handle the rough and tumble that is the New York City subway.
Right. And Brad, one thing that Mayor Adams has also been pushing for is more police in the subways, but you can't have a cop on every train car. So how helpful do you think that would be, and what more can be done by the city, at least, to make the subway safer?
More cops are more of a psychological bandage for people going to and from the subway. I'm not convinced you can do a whole lot more. To Aaron's point, I don't believe there is any technology that could screen 3 million people a day. So we'll see where that goes. There's just going to be a built-in vulnerability, let's face it, in using public transportation, and we all have to keep our eyes and ears open and obviously report anything we see.
Right, and fueling a larger push to address some of the issues behind the scenes potentially here. Aaron, sources also tell ABC News that Rudy Giuliani has assisted federal investigators in accessing several electronic devices seized from his home and his office in an FBI raid. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, we just got off with his attorney and spoke to some law enforcement officials about Rudy Giuliani, the President Trump's former personal attorney. You'll recall back last April, there was a rather high-profile raid of his office and his home by the FBI. They seized a bunch of electronic devices, nearly 24 of them, in fact. And they're being reviewed. The material on those devices is being reviewed. But in a couple of instances, they haven't been able to access the phones. They've been locked. Now Rudy Giuliani has assisted in unlocking those phones. His attorney told us it's because he's an innocent man.
All right, interesting. Aaron Katersky, Brad Garrett, great to have you both. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.